Greetings, magical mavens. A merry solstice to all, and to all a good year. In this video, I invite you to join me for an enchanting endeavor in preparing for winter. Starting at Halloween and ending December 1st, this is part 1 of my journey to transition out of harvest season and into hibernation. Stay tuned for part 2 as the magic ramps up to Yule and the new year. But for part 1, I invite you to come along with me for a cozy, relaxing vlog as we put the garden to bed for the year, finish preserving the harvest of magical and medicinal plants from my most epic year of foraging yet, do some fall cleaning, take a trip to a historic cemetery for a spooky photo shoot, gradually transition from fall to winter decor, do a bit of year's end magic and ritual, find some late season foraging, save seeds, and even fit in a few epic furniture flips just in time for the holidays. So pour yourself a goblet of your favorite festive witch's brew and let's make some magic. Greetings, magical mavens. I thought it would be fun to start our apothecary tour by just showing you some of what I have sitting out right now. So this is an oil of jewel weed that I started honestly quite a while ago, and I really need to strain that out. I've been very busy. This is some sweet woodruff. This one was a really exciting thing to find. This is a honey made from staghorn sumac that again really needs to be strained out now. And this is a honey made of goldenrod. These are some dried mallow flowers. These are some dried self-heal plants. Aerial parts is the technical term. These are some dried, and this one is drying, you can almost tell the difference here, turkey tail mushroom. This one might also look different because it came from a totally different spot. They can be a wide range of colors actually in these sort of stripe patterns that they have. Here we have some dried calendula flowers. This is my entire growing season's worth of calendula flowers, and actually today on November 1st there might still be some growing. I just picked the last few yesterday actually on Halloween, but I have a feeling that since the plants are still there, more flowers might pop up. This is some dried catnip. This is some dried plantain. These are some now dried pumpkin seeds from our pumpkin spell that we did in a video together. It's time for me to put those away to plant next spring. These are some fresh rose hips. This is some now dried mugwort. And this is an insane cat. He's having a hard time because he likes to go outside now, but he's struggling with the temperature and he just doesn't seem to know what to do with himself. And over here we have some just about dried raspberry leaves. And underneath, what do we have hiding? We have some reishi mushroom that I believe is now dried and ready to store. Hanging up in the corner of the room here, we have some goldenrod that should be dry by now. On the other side here, we have some dried mugwort. They look very similar, don't they? Even though obviously the goldenrod is a bit more gold, but that was a younger plant, so it's not the super bright yellow. I've learned actually from Earthseed Detroit's channel that you want to pick your goldenrod before it starts to be really big yellow flowers. You can even see right here, because once they do that, once they're in full bloom, once you go to dry them, they immediately do the dandelion fluff thing, which I don't know if that's necessarily bad. I'm sure you can totally still use it for tea, but I think it's just more potent and like easier to work with when it's these tiny little buds here that are not fluffy yet. Oh, and this one back here is some wild, whoops, guess this one's ready to come down. Some wild bergamot, which by the way is not at all the same thing as the bergamot essential oil that you get that smells like oranges. I don't know why they're called the same thing, and it took me a while to figure this out, but wild bergamot is actually something in the mint family that smells and tastes very similar to oregano, actually. So its other name is wild oregano. And the bergamot essential oil is actually made from, I believe it's orange blossom, or no, that's neroli. I don't know, but that's something completely different that's like not local to northeastern USA. So interesting fact, but these have beautiful purple flowers when they're not totally gone to seed like these ones happen to be. Also, now that this has fallen off and I'm taking a closer look at it, I'm realizing this is actually just some of the younger goldenrod, not mugwort. They look so similar. I had no idea they would look so similar once they were dry, so next time I'll probably label that. In the window, we have some fresh catnip. And down here on the windowsill, we have some self-heal that I brought in for winter. We'll see if it survives. We have a propagation of that sweet woodruff. There's also some that I've planted outside, but since I found it in the kind of mid to late fall, I thought it would be nice to try an experiment of keeping some inside just in case it doesn't root down well enough to survive the winter outside. This is a tarragon seedling that only ever got this big that I planted back in the spring. This is a kale seedling that only got this big, and I'm realizing I should get rid of it because there are actually aphids on that, and we do not want those inside the house with our houseplants, now do we? This is a sage seedling that never got very big. I don't know why I'm keeping these. They're not dead, and I feel bad getting rid of them because I really worked hard to get certain seedlings started this year, so we'll see if they ever make a comeback and whether or not their growth is already stunted. Same with this thing I'm very excited about, lavender. These are the only lavender seeds I got to sprout, and this is as big as they got so far. So here we go. Funnily enough though, I also recently planted some store-bought lemon seeds. I don't even think it was from an organic lemon. Interestingly enough, sometimes random seeds from the supermarket will grow and not just the ones that they say are more ideal for that. This is some leftover basil that has already well since gone to flower and is probably extremely bitter, but I keep it around anyway for some reason. And moving over to the other side of the room, we have some well since dried mountain mint that I can jar up whenever I'm ready. And all the way up here, we have a few little rose hips and some very long dried mallow flowers. And here are those last few calendula flowers. I had that other bowl on the back of the stove here drying all summer, but I wanted to just let these final few dry separately because I'm about ready to put the rest in the jar, and we definitely don't want moist flowers going in there. And over here, we have quite a few things. We have an example of that beautiful bright yellow but fluffy goldenrod, and I've been kind of actively using this one up since it's going to be a little bit too fluffy to really stash effectively. We've got some more of those beautiful little rose hips and some more mugwort. This is a prized find from this summer, is some yarrow, which I had never experienced before this summer, and I have quite a bit of it here. This one is darker because I actually tried to root this plant, but it didn't really work. It dried out, and since this plant is so precious to me, I decided to just keep that and probably just use it up first since it's not in as good condition. It's just very, very sunburnt, so it's probably not quite as potent, but that's okay to me. And moving on to over here, we have some mugwort. I wanted to get some mugwort that wasn't in flower since the other mugwort that I already had from my own yard was in flower by the time I got to harvesting it. These are some more calendula that I thought would be fun to hang in a bundle since they perfectly match my fall decor. And over here, we just have some dehydrated produce that was in the pantry that I decided I wanted to use up relatively soon, and so I think I'm going to be making a casserole out of these soon. And of course, finally, there is just my nettle and my nettle tea. Cheers. I'm just documenting our foolishness.
Don't go stepping on nobody.
Oh my gosh. Wow. It's not a myth. What are you doing, bro? Running across the road.
I'm just being a nuisance.
So, funny story about this magical photo shoot. I tried to warn my sister that there was a sunset curfew at the cemetery, and of course she both took forever curling her hair before we got there and insisted on getting a bit of the sunset in her shots, because of course she did, and of course the sun goes down fast after Halloween. So of course I was trying to tell her it was about time to leave when security showed up with flashing lights. The guy showed up in his flashing car and just gave us a look as we ran toward our car, and then followed behind us with his flashing lights as we found our way to the exit, where he had to open the giant 1800s wrought iron gate to let us out. Whoops! What troublemakers we turned out to be. We were very sheltered youths, so this kind of good, clean tomfoolery that we occasionally get up to as adults really makes us chuckle. As I mentioned in my recent video on how I filled my apothecary, I'll be catching you up soon on all the foraging I got up to in the late summer into early fall, as I'm showing you how I'm using what I preserved in my winter concoctions. One thing it was a really good year for were mushrooms. My sister, partner, and I have been foraging for edible mushrooms ever since last autumn equinox, when we found our first chicken of the woods in what manifested to be my new neighborhood. This year, we've learned a lot and have also gotten a lot of different oyster mushrooms as well.
Let me get a close-up of it. Wow. Oh, it's so pretty. I want to make these out of like paper or something, you know?
I think people make them out of hot glue, actually.
Wow.
While gardening for food crops proved to be quite a challenge here due to slugs and rodents my first year, being able to fill my freezer with a full year's supply of wild mushrooms has been a huge blessing in my journey towards living more off the land. Yay! This last oyster flush was totally unexpected this late in the season after we hadn't found anything in weeks. We had figured the mushrooming season was over. And we had never seen this darker colored variety before, and you should have seen the look on my sister's face when she saw it out of the corner of her eye, hiding behind a tree just off path. She stopped mid-sentence and just screamed. And speaking of that first ever chicken of the woods harvest last year, thankfully we did get to harvest from that epic log again this year, but then the town ground it up. So we decided to collect the remains to see if it will grow on my log by sprinkling the sawdust over it. I don't know if it'll work, but it was worth a try. I also leave the stems of the oysters and some dried mushrooms that I find out in nature that are too far gone to eat into my yard just to see if anything grows next year.
Looks like a portobello.
Look at that thing. I started this idea of upcycling my TV back in the spring, and then gardening and foraging season happened. I kept meaning to get back to it, but I just couldn't seem to spare the time and energy. So this area has just sat here collecting dust and stray craft supplies, waiting for the day when finally crafting season would return. I kind of knew all along that I wouldn't likely be able to return to it until fall, and well, I decided today was that day. Fall and winter for me are a time of returning inward and getting back to creative projects in the home that can't be my main focus during the growing season. This project is essentially a trash into treasure project, and it's pretty much made out of junk. This is an old TV that used to be my dad's many years ago. The frame is made up of scrap wood left over from one of my sister's projects that I Frankensteined together. The centerpiece is something I found for $1 or $2 at a thrift store many years ago and never knew what to do with until now. The cherub was found on the ground somewhere, I think. I don't remember, honestly. Most of the paints have been in my collection for years, and the shiny powder stuff is something that my sister didn't use for her business and gave to me last year. It all came together perfectly, and the only thing I spent money on for this project was the Gorilla Glue sticks I invested in, since clearly the regular hot glue I tried to use back in the spring didn't hold very well. It's amazing what a bit of creativity and scrap materials can do. Along my journey, I've had times of identifying as a starving artist, and I got very good at turning trash into treasure. And while at this point in my journey, I've definitely learned to live more prosperously and know when to invest in new things, I'm also still grateful that I have the inspiration and the skills necessary to sometimes turn trash into treasure when it suits the situation. I'm not a huge TV watcher, so I had no desire for a larger or more fancy screen, especially after my partner realized that it was missing a screw and that was why it was crooked for so long. Some of you guys from my old channel will remember when I used to stick this ceramic pumpkin underneath one side of it all year round just to keep it from being super crooked. Anyway, it's also helped to learn how to fix things. I've done a lot of that in the past few years as well. And it just so happened that I was feeling inspired enough to use these already handy materials that I followed the urge to challenge myself to make it all work with a zero budget as I was investing in other things at the time. It was fun to make and I think it turned out great. And boy does it feel good to finally have this area complete and sorted out, so now I can actually decorate it for the seasons. And now to rearrange my books to display the fall and winter colors. This is a seasonal decorating tradition that also costs $0, accumulates no additional stuff around the house, and creates zero waste, assuming that these books don't someday end up in a landfill. They're biodegradable, right? For the most part. Anyway, this is another way that I embrace what I like to call mindful maximalism in my home. I like to have a lot of stuff, but I also don't like to have unnecessary stuff, especially, again, things that are not biodegradable. For example, I like to keep a small library, so I might as well utilize it as a way to deck the halls rather than buying extra artificial decor to fill the space. Back when I was living more of a city apartment lifestyle and didn't have as much to do outdoors, I used to do this book changeover 4 to 8 times a year. If not for each of the 8 witches sabbats, at least once per overall season. But now I only do it twice a year, in the spring and the fall. This is also a great time to inventory my books, to prioritize reading certain ones, and give away anything that I don't think I'll get around to reading. Again, another aspect of mindful maximalism. Only keeping the things that you want, need, or truly enjoy. So if you're a returning viewer here, or if you followed my other channel, welcome back. This scene may be something you expect to see in my seasonal videos. But if you're new to my content, welcome by the way, and I'd love to introduce you to this fun tradition of mine. I keep a Christmas tree up all year long, changing out the decorations to celebrate every season. I've been doing this for quite a few years now. In fact, there was a point where I mentioned on my other channel that I might not do it anymore, and people were very upset and said that I have to keep doing it. And I'm glad they did, because this really is a great tradition. And I've even gradually replaced and upgraded my main tree over time. Again, still mostly things I found in the trash, but I found bigger and better ones, and hopefully I'll get an even nicer one next year. We'll see. Maybe I'll actually invest in one for the first time in my life. But when I first started out, I just happened to have these two mini trees that I used to flank my TV with at my old apartment, and I used to update them every 6 weeks for the 8 seasons on the Wheel of the Year, essentially representing the early and late phase of each of the 4 seasons. But with life being more busy now, I've evolved my practice to do one big change out for the tree 4 times per year, and I've switched over to this just one taller tree. And I gradually add and remove elements as the seasons progress. I like to draw inspiration from what I'm seeing outside, so it's definitely time to get these aster flowers out of here and reduce the amount of fall leaves as winter begins to set in. I'll be back later in the video to continue transitioning this room even more. Greetings, magical mavens. I just wanted to pop in with a quick thought that was running through my brain. So I am loving taking down the bulky fall decor, specifically the big bouquets of fake fall leaves. I'm just leaving up some of the individual fake fall leaves, mostly the red ones actually, and I might even take off all of the yellow ones. But when I was working on sewing something earlier, in the background I was watching a video from Garden Answer, and Laura was talking about how she loves the way this certain twisty pattern of ribbon looks on her Christmas tree, but she kind of hates doing it. And I was like, that's how I feel about putting rose hips up on the tree. Like, rose hips are the perfect solution to wanting to have natural red winter berries on the tree that don't rot and that also can be used. They dry really well, and regardless of how long they're sitting there, you can still take them down and use them for tea. But they're very painful because they're roses, right? So that's how I feel about that. But I was just having this train of thought because it's been quite a few years since I've done that twisty spiral ribbon going around the tree. I did do that, I think, quite a few years ago now. That was on YouTube, so I can go back and see when it was. But Part of me agreed with what she was saying, that it is just like a very fiddly sort of difficult thing to do. But aside from that, I think the reason why I don't usually do it is actually due to my seasonal practice. As you can see, I very rarely have a blank slate to work with when it comes to my tree. I keep my tree up all year and I always have stuff on there. And I'm usually, unless there's some very rare circumstance going on, starting from a place of not wanting to take everything off as the season is changing. As you can see, I am not taking everything off to start decorating for winter. I am just taking pieces off and then adding other pieces in. And in order to do that sort of twisty spiral ribbon thing, you kind of have to start with a blank slate. You have to take everything off and then put the things back on once the ribbon is on. And I was thinking, I was like, when do I ever, except for obviously when I was moving and the time when the tree fell down and I kind of had to start from scratch, but like, when do I ever have a blank slate of a tree that I actually want to start fresh? And it is a seasonal thing. The most likely time for that to happen is around the spring equinox, because around February's Eve, I've taken down probably a lot of like the colored stuff on there, and there's just like dead foraged things that are like a tan color, like wispy stuff, and then there's like fake snowflakes and icicles on there. And what's interesting is that that is really the only time of year when I do kind of want to have a completely blank slate and a completely fresh start. And there's kind of two reasons for that. On the one hand, energetically, seasonally, that is the astrological new year. And it is that sort of blank slate, fresh start, clean everything up, spring cleaning type of energy for me. On the other hand, it's also because that is the most, I think, stark change between one season and the next. Between spring and summer, you've got flowers, and then you slowly transition into a different type of flowers. And then from summer to fall, it's slightly just a different change in color and a bit more abundance. And then you start adding colored leaves and things like that. For winter, as you can see, there's still a transition of leaves going on, and then I start to bring in things like pine cones and red berries and stuff like that, and fruit. And then I like to switch out from like all of the fruits and berries and things like that and the leaves in the early winter to just like snowflakes and some like dried real foliage for the in bulk season, or what I like to call February's Eve. But once the spring equinox comes, it's just such a stark difference. Like, you go from like old dead stuff and snowflakes to hopefully less snowflakes and fresh new live stuff. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like, I guess I kind of obviously knew that, but I've never fully like processed that in quite such a direct manner, I guess. And it really embodies that concept of spring cleaning. Like, I like to do fall cleaning because like obviously you've been tramping in and out with muddy shoes all summer and you're getting ready to spend some time, you know, inside really being cozy and hopefully having a nice, clean, fresh space. But there's something just very natural and universal and almost more potent about spring cleaning because it's so symbolic. It's like this complete blank slate, fresh start, end of the old, beginning of the new type of energy. And that's part of what's fun about these just quirky little traditions of living seasonally. Like for me, my seasonal tree, because like on the one hand, obviously it's just a fun and festive thing to do to recognize what's going on with the seasons. But when we also slow down to like look a little bit deeper at the symbolism of it, it just reminds us over and over again of the profoundness of the beauty of nature and the cycles. So before I continue just rambling and saying like the same thing over and over again in different prose, I'm gonna get back to adding these prickly ass berries onto the tree. But yeah, going back to the berry thing, I was really excited when I moved to an area that has a ridiculous amount of rose hips, because a few years ago, I really wanted to get into the whole like natural winter solstice decorations thing. And I looked around on Pinterest, and there's this old tradition of doing a garland out of like popcorn and cranberries. So I did that a few years ago, or actually I did that last year. And it was so much work, and I injured my finger so many times with like the needle trying to stab through the popcorn and the berries. Cranberries are one of those like special seasonal things that you get at the grocery store, and if, in my area typically I can only get them in like the specialty grocery store, and they're kind of expensive, and honestly I would rather eat them and like preserve them in my kitchen than just have them rotting on a Christmas tree, especially because that can attract things like fruit flies, and where I live now, like I don't want to mess around with things that bugs are even remotely interested in. And so I was hoping when I did that last year that they would like dehydrate themselves and that I could maybe even keep them for a whole year. Not the case. The rose hips are actually the perfect solution, so I'm very excited about that. So in the darkness of the night, it is pretty hard from far away to see what's been done to the tree, so I've just kind of showed you some close-ups of the beautiful berries. I'll try and get another shot tomorrow, but you might have noticed that earlier in the video I removed one of the ceramic pumpkins and then I put it back. And the reason why is because at the time of me filming this, it is not even Thanksgiving yet. That's a few days away. I'm not ready to get rid of pumpkins. And in fact, my real pumpkins that are in here will be with me if all goes according to plan until the spring equinox, when I ritualistically cut into them, feast on their flesh, and plant their seeds directly into the ground to represent gratitude for surviving the winter, which is what our ancestors would have done with fruits like pumpkins. I mean, not that specific ritual exactly, but maybe something very similar to it. That's kind of the whole point of things like winter squashes, is that they can last for that long if they're put in the right conditions. I'm not going to go on a whole ramble about that because I do have a full video on it, which I will link up here or down there. So this is kind of something that I've been feeling into as I've been making not just this video, but also the more informational video on the astrology and traditions and practices that I like to do for the winter solstice over on my other channel. Obviously, for a video like that, I have to film it in advance in order for it to come out a little bit before the winter solstice. So I've been intentionally filming things for that, as well as included just relevant footage from like previous months, even in the fall, kind of leading up to that time period. And I've kind of been grappling because, like, on the one hand, from like an aesthetic YouTube standpoint, it feels like that video was a little bit too fall, when most people who are talking about the winter solstice are showing very like wintry, Christmassy types of footage, which I did include some of that from like last year. But if I'm being true and authentic, not just to my practice, but also to like practicing what I preach, the thing is, the winter solstice is the astrological first day of winter, which means that the entire time leading up to it, all of Sagittarius season in particular, is literally still fall. And so it's really a celebration of like the transition between fall and winter. And while I don't personally have ties to Thanksgiving, very quick reasoning behind that for anyone who's new to me is that I was raised by Muslims who converted to Islam from Christianity and who are American. And so part of the reason for that is that we didn't celebrate like Christian holidays, including Christmas. I did not celebrate Christmas. The winter solstice is my way of like celebrating a winter holiday that I didn't get to do when I was growing up. But the other part of it is that my family were very like anti-establishmentarianism when it comes to things that are just like dogmatic and bullshit, which honestly, no shade to anyone who does celebrate Thanksgiving, but it really is kind of just an insult to Native Americans in a way. And so that was the reason why we didn't celebrate it. And while I have been to Thanksgiving many times as an adult with friends and partners and things like that, I don't personally celebrate it. However, I do find it interesting and the concept of harvest festivals and all of that. And I do recognize it as sort of a day on the calendar that is a seasonal marker culturally for us here in America. And so I tend to like it when people keep their fall decorations up until at least after Thanksgiving, as opposed to shifting right to Christmas right after Halloween. And so even though that particular holiday is not something that's very relevant for me, it is a seasonal marker. I'm rambling at this point, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I really enjoy other people's videos where they gradually shift through the seasons instead of just changing in an instant. For example, I really enjoyed a video on It's a Charming Life recently where they were calling it like a holiday video, but it was really them preparing for the holidays, and a lot of it was fall stuff. Like that to me is real life. Again, no shade to anyone that shifts right to Christmas, but it does kind of bug me a little bit that there's this sort of expectation of like seasonal decorating type videos and stuff like that, that like as soon as Halloween or at least Thanksgiving is over, you have to like instantly change everything. You have to get rid of all of the orange, all of the leaves, all of the pumpkins, when like in real life, especially depending on where you live, that might not be the case. I put my ceramic pumpkin back up for now. I'll probably take that down around the 1st of December, but like the real pumpkins are gonna stick around. And so I did go ahead and get rid of all of just the like yellow and orange fake leaves that were on the tree, and I am shifting to just like more of a red color scheme here, just to kind of change the energy of it without fully disregarding the fact that here it is still fall. Most of the leaves have fallen, but there are some definite places in my area where there are still leaves. And so yeah, you will see me coming back and continuing to gradually evolve this tree. I think I'm circling back around to what I was meaning to say. So what you'll notice here is that there are no winter, like frozen icicle, snowflakey type ornaments on the tree yet. And I was thinking, I was like, is there anything else that I want to add to this right now? And honestly, no. The answer is no. I'm not ready to put the icy stuff on because it hasn't snowed here yet, and snow is not in the forecast for the next 10 days at least. So when that happens, that for me is my sort of moment of like, now it's time to do it because now it's happening. Now, I'll be honest, the prospect of stashing away all of the foraged herbs in my kitchen felt like a looming, overwhelming task for quite a while. Many of these plants had been hanging up for months, and some of the concoctions that needed straining off were well over the usual moon cycle that I would normally leave them for. Life was extremely busy all summer and ramped up even more for fall as the harvest came in, as we prioritized outdoor ventures before the cold set in, and as the season of the witch comes with a lot of business projects for me. So as soon as things settled down enough from all of that to really set aside the time to enjoy it, I decided to turn this practice into a relaxing ritual. I lit some candles to set a magical, intentional mood and focused on gratitude. This way, I was able to feel good about approaching this task rather than rushing through it or bringing forward the energy of feeling overwhelmed with yet another task. Sometimes ritualizing something is the best way to get things done, especially when it's something you really are grateful for underneath the guise of overwhelm. These beautiful seasonal practices to connect us with nature are an invitation to slow down and be present and mindful, even if that's the only time in a week that you're actually able to get into a meditative space. Yes, I got pretty burned out this year trying to do way too many projects at once, but I'm also literally living the life I desperately wanted a year or so ago. I've learned a big lesson in slowing down and going at a manageable pace instead of letting gung-ho excitement cause me to bite off more than I can chew, but even so, it's important to slow down as much as possible and enjoy what I have, even if I'm tired and overworked. Part of the reason I let this task pile up like this is because I wanted to wait until I had time to film it properly for you guys, instead of just filming it imperfectly or bit by bit here and there in different lighting and different outfits and different situations. And I recognize that this was a choice. It's a gift and a challenge to get to share my life with you guys in this way, and this year has taught me a lot about learning the balance between sharing quality versus quantity. I understand why I felt I needed to film just about everything I did this year. I wanted to dive headfirst into this more nature-based lifestyle and wanted to document that entire process, both for my own memory and for your inspiration. For those of us craving a more natural, domestic, and magical lifestyle, it can seem really unrelatable or unattainable when everyone sharing this kind of stuff online looks like they've been deeply established in that kind of lifestyle since forever, and we don't get to see them build up from nothing. I wanted you to get to see where I'm coming from and get to watch my journey from the ground up, and I'm really glad that I stayed committed to that this year. Even if it means some of the videos are getting to you guys a little bit late, or a lot late for some of the harvest stuff. But going into the new year, I definitely have a goal of slowing down a bit, choosing quality over quantity, both for the projects I choose to delve into myself in the first place, and for what I choose to film and how I choose to share it. Now that I'm established on a basic level in my new home, garden, and foraging environment, I want to stop going at such a breakneck pace and start focusing more on sharing individual projects and ideas with you based on what I've learned thus far as I continue to build on these foundations and seasonal practices. And based on what you guys have seen in this year that you want to see a deeper look into. While vlogging in general can be fun, the truth is, artful filmmaking is one of my lifelong loves, and one of my goals as an artist is to get better and better at telling a story visually through film. And I know that's something a lot of my viewers on this channel and my other channel have mentioned that they appreciate about my work. That I don't just share inspiration and ideas, but I also take the filmmaking process seriously because it is an art form for me. It's not just a means to the end of sharing information. I want it to be a relaxing, inspiring, and enchanting experience for you as a viewer. So going forward, I'd like to film less often, but more wholeheartedly. Sharing my best work both as a filmmaker and as someone who likes to share valuable and inspiring ideas. Let me know what you as a viewer think about this intention. And please also leave a comment letting me know what you've enjoyed the most on my channel thus far, and I'll take that into account as I'm choosing what to focus on in videos in the new year. So as you just saw in earlier scenes, I hate my glass table. Without a tablecloth, you can see straight through to the robot vacuum and whatever other random stuff I end up stashing underneath it in my small kitchen. At the moment, that would be a growing stash of flammable materials with which to kindle my Yule log fire, for example. I've been looking to replace this cheap Wayfair find almost ever since I got it about 6 years ago now. At the time, it was a hasty solution to having no furniture when I moved into my last apartment. I was going through a phase of confusion about what my personal style was, and I also just needed stuff very quickly, and at the time, I didn't have the time or the schedule to be constantly scouring thrift stores like I tend to do now. So I just went for something instant online, affordable, and clean looking, since I was kind of going for more of like a clean aesthetic or whatever. I've since come back home to myself as a quirky vintage lover that I've always been, and this table just doesn't suit my style or my life anymore. I need something strong, sturdy, and with character, so I can do projects on it and slice fruits and things without the flimsy legs shaking constantly. I've even considered the temporary solution of getting a proper tablecloth for it at least, but I didn't even want to spend the money on something like that when I would rather just spend it on a new old table. So I've just been off again, on again using this utility cloth, but it's hard to keep clean and it stains easily and it's just a pain. I've been keeping an eye out for the perfect wooden table at thrift stores, but I just haven't found what I'm looking for. And my partner suggested that maybe it's because tables so easily have their surfaces ruined that by the time somebody runs an old table into the ground, it might as well just become firewood as opposed to making it to the thrift store. And I really want some kind of like vintage wooden table. Anyway, it's complicated. I know eventually the right table will come along, but in the meantime, this cozy cottage cobblestone design will just create much more of the vibe I'm going for, and just in time for the holiday season. And on that note, magical mavens, I just want to say thank you so much, not just for joining me for this winter transition video and making it all the way to the end, but also for supporting my channel this year. This new channel was me going out on a limb to try something different that I felt would feed my soul and yours. And honestly, since it was so difficult, grueling, and time-consuming to get to this many followers on my old channel, literally, it took like 10 years, and I don't have that many more followers on that channel than I now do on this one. I have just been so grateful at how quickly this has grown. Whether this is your first video with me, or if you've been watching since back in the spring when I launched, or if you've been with me for anywhere between 1 and 10 years on my other channel, thank you so much for being here and for being your magical self in the world. Until next time, a blessed solstice to all, and to all a good year.